Today probably felt like any other day, nothing extraordinary, nothing magical on the surface. You woke up, followed your routine, smiled where you had to, stayed quiet where you needed to, and carried on like you always do, but what you don't realize is that somewhere far away from you, at a moment you didn't even notice, something shifted inside someone else, a quiet, unexplainable feeling, a pull they couldn't name, a thought that didn't belong to their usual day, and that someone is your soulmate, yes, the one your heart has been unknowingly connected to long before your lives ever crossed. You may not know their face. You may have never heard their voice, you may have never stood in front of them long enough to recognize what they are to you, but today something changed, because sometimes souls don't wait for introductions, they don't wait for timing, they recognize each other silently, beyond logic, beyond distance, and today your existence brushed against theirs in a way neither of you fully understands yet. Maybe they paused for no reason. Maybe they stared at the sky a little longer than usual, maybe they felt a sudden wave of emotion that didn't make sense, not sadness, not happiness, just something deep and unsettling yet strangely comforting. That was you, or rather that was the part of you that already belongs to them. The strange thing about soulmate connections is that they don't follow rules, they don't care about circumstances, and sometimes they arrive at the most complicated moments of life, because the truth, the one people don't like to accept, is that your soulmate might already be living a life that doesn't have space for you. They might already be committed, already tied to responsibilities, already walking a path that makes your connection feel impossible, and yet even then the feeling doesn't disappear. Today they felt it, a quiet realization that somewhere out there exists someone who understands them without explanation, someone whose presence feels like home without ever being there. But along with that realization came something heavier, something they couldn't ignore, because it's not easy to feel something so real when your life is already built around something else. When your choices have already been made, when your world has already taken shape without you in it, and yet they couldn't push it away, they couldn't pretend it wasn't there. Because what they felt wasn't ordinary, it wasn't temporary, it wasn't something that could be explained or dismissed. It was you, not your name, not your face, but your energy, your presence reaching them without effort, and for a moment everything else faded, just for a second they wondered who you are, why this feels so familiar, why this feels like something they've been missing without even knowing it, and maybe they smiled without understanding why. Because the universe has a strange way of connecting people, not always to bring them together, but sometimes to awaken something inside them, to remind them that love is deeper than what they've known so far, and today you became that reminder, without doing anything, without even knowing it, you became a part of someone's emotional world in a way that is rare and sacred. But this is where it becomes difficult, because while you may one day realize who they are, or maybe you already feel it deep inside, the path between you and them is not simple, it is not straight, it is filled with choices, consequences, and realities that cannot be ignored. Your soulmate is not free, and neither is your heart in the way it wants to be. There is a reason this connection came without clarity, without an easy beginning, without a guaranteed future, because this kind of love asks for something deeper than just being together. It asks for strength, it asks for patience, and most of all it asks for integrity, because loving someone doesn't always mean holding on to them, sometimes it means stepping back. Sometimes it means choosing what is right over what feels right, sometimes it means carrying a love that may never be fully expressed but will always remain real, and today that journey began, not with words, not with a meeting, but with a feeling, a silent acknowledgement between two souls who may never say it out loud but will always know, and somewhere inside you maybe you felt it too, that sudden stillness, that unexplained emotion. That heaviness in your chest that came and went like a quiet wave, you ignored it, thinking it was nothing, just another passing moment, but it wasn't, it was them reaching you in the only way they can for now, and as time moves forward life will continue to test this connection. There will be moments of doubt when you question if any of this is real, if it's just your mind creating meaning where there is none, but deep down you will know, because real connections don't need constant proof, they exist quietly, they stay, they shape you, and even if the world never sees it, even if the story never unfolds the way you once imagined, this connection will change you in ways you cannot yet understand. It will teach you patience, it will teach you restraint, it will teach you that love is not always about having. Sometimes it is about becoming, and maybe one day in another time, another life, or another version of reality things will be different, maybe paths will align, maybe circumstances will shift, or maybe this is all it was ever meant to be, a moment, a feeling, a silent life-changing connection that exists not in the physical world but in the space between two souls who found each other even when they were not supposed to, and that does not make it any less real. If anything, it makes it even more powerful, because not all love stories are meant to be lived out loud, some are meant to be felt deeply, quietly, and carried with dignity. So today, even if nothing looked different, everything changed, because somewhere out there your soulmate felt you, and that means whether life allows it or not, a part of you already belongs to each other, and the truth is, as much as you try to move forward like nothing happened, something inside you has already started to change in ways you cannot fully explain. Because once a soul recognizes its counterpart, even from a distance, even without words, even without presence, it leaves an imprint that cannot be erased. You may try to distract yourself, you may try to convince your mind that this is just a phase, just a passing emotion, just something your heart created out of loneliness or imagination, but deep down there is a quiet knowing that refuses to disappear, a silent voice that keeps reminding you that what you felt was real, and not everything real needs proof, not everything meaningful needs to be seen or touched to exist, because some connections are felt in ways that go beyond logic, beyond timing, beyond the structure of the life you are currently living, and the more you try to ignore it, the more it finds its way back to you in the smallest moments, in the pauses between your thoughts, in the silence when the world is quiet, in the nights when you are alone with yourself and your emotions have nowhere to hide. That is when it becomes undeniable, That is when you realize that this is not something you can simply walk away from, because it was never something you chose in the first place. It was something that happened to you, something that found you without permission, without warning, and without an easy way out, and somewhere out there they are going through the same quiet confusion, the same internal conflict, the same unspoken realization that something has shifted inside them that they cannot fully control. They may try to push it down, to focus on their responsibilities, to remind themselves of the life they have built, the commitments they have made, the people they are connected to. But even in the middle of all that, there will be moments where your presence crosses their mind like a soft whisper they cannot silence. Not loud enough to disrupt everything, but strong enough to stay, and that is what makes this connection both beautiful and painful at the same time, because it exists in a space where it cannot fully grow, yet it refuses to fade. It lives in the in-between, in the almost, in the what-if. In the silent understanding that if things were different, if timing was kinder, if life had taken another path, maybe this would have been something extraordinary in a way the world could see, but instead it exists in a hidden place, a place where emotions are real but choices are limited, where feelings are deep but actions are restrained, and that is where integrity begins to matter the most, because it is easy to follow your heart when there are no consequences. It is easy to choose love when it does not require sacrifice, but this kind of connection asks something greater from you. It asks you to be strong enough to feel everything and still choose what is right. It asks you to respect not only your own heart but also the lives that are already connected to theirs. It asks you to understand that sometimes love is not about being together but about protecting the purity of what you feel from becoming something that could hurt others, and that is not weakness, that is strength in its truest form, because not everyone is capable of loving with boundaries, not everyone is capable of holding something so deep and still choosing not to let it turn into something destructive, and you will have moments where this feels unfair, where you question why you had to feel this at all if it was never meant to be lived fully, why you had to meet someone on a soul level only to realize that reality does not allow it to unfold the way your heart wants, and those questions will not always have clear answers. Sometimes the universe does not give explanations, it only gives experiences that shape you, that break you open, that teach you things about yourself you would have never learned otherwise, and maybe that is part of the reason this connection exists, not just to bring two people together, but to transform them individually, to make you more aware of what love truly means, to make you understand that love is not possession, it is not control, it is not about claiming someone as yours, it is about recognizing something sacred and choosing to honor it in the most respectful way possible. Even if that means letting it exist without forcing it into a form that the world can label or accept, and as time goes on you will start to notice that this connection, as complicated as it is also shaping you into someone stronger, someone more patient, someone more emotionally aware, because you are learning how to sit with feelings instead of running from them. You are learning how to accept what you cannot change instead of trying to control everything. You are learning how to love without needing immediate results, and that is Something very few people ever truly understand, and even though this path is not easy, even though there will be days where the weight of it feels too much, where you wish things were simpler, where you wish this connection had come into your life in a different way, there will also be moments of quiet peace, moments where you feel grateful for it, not because it gave you what you wanted, but because it showed you a depth of emotion that most people spend their entire lives searching for. It showed you that your heart is capable of something real, something meaningful, something that goes beyond surface-level attraction or temporary feelings, and that is not something to regret, that is something to value, even if it comes with pain, because pain and depth often walk together, and the kind of love that changes you is rarely the kind that comes easily, it is the kind that challenges you, that forces you to grow, that makes you face parts of yourself you did not even know existed, and maybe one day this connection will find its place in your life in a way that makes sense, or maybe it will remain exactly what it is right now, something felt but not fully lived, something understood but not openly expressed, something real but not visible to the world, and if that is the case, then it does not make it meaningless, it simply makes it different, it makes it something that belongs to you in a quiet, personal way, something that does not need validation from anyone else to be real, and as you continue your journey you will begin to understand that not every story is meant to have a traditional ending, not every connection is meant to follow the path you once imagined, some are meant to exist as lessons, as transformations, as moments that shift your entire perspective without ever becoming a permanent part of your everyday life, and that is okay, because even if you and your soulmate never stand side by side in the way you once dreamed of, even if your lives continue on separate paths, there will always be a part of you that carries this connection with quiet understanding, not as a burden, but as something meaningful, something that reminded you what it feels like to truly feel, and somewhere out there they will carry it too, in their own way, in their own silence, in their own life, and even if you never speak about it, even if the world never knows, even if everything remains exactly as it is, the truth will remain unchanged, that on a day that seemed completely ordinary, something extraordinary happened between two souls who were never supposed to meet like this, and yet somehow they did, and that kind of connection does not disappear, it simply transforms into something that lives within you, quietly, deeply, and forever, and as time keeps moving forward, you will slowly begin to realize that this connection was never meant to give you immediate answers. It was meant to make you sit with questions, to feel things you cannot explain, to experience a depth that most people avoid their entire lives, because it is easier to live on the surface than to dive into something that shakes your entire emotional world, and yet here you are, unable to go back to the version of yourself that did not know what this feels like, because once you have felt something this real, even in silence, even from a distance, it changes the way you see everything, it changes the way you understand love, it changes the way you connect with people, because now you know that there is a difference between ordinary feelings and something that touches your soul, and that awareness will stay with you, it will follow you into your future, into every decision, into every connection you form, and there will be moments where you will try to compare, where you will wonder if you will ever feel something like this again, in a way that is simpler, in a way that is allowed, in a way that does not come with so many complications. And maybe you will, or maybe you will not, but that is not the point, because this connection was never meant to be replaced, it was meant to be experienced, understood, and carried with a kind of quiet acceptance. And the hardest part of all of this is not the distance, not the silence, not even the impossibility of it. The hardest part is learning how to live your life fully while still holding something that you cannot fully express, learning how to smile, how to move forward, how to build your own path while a part of your heart exists somewhere else, tied to someone who may never stand beside you in the way you once imagined. And that is where your strength will truly be tested, because it is easy to give up on something when it hurts, but it is much harder to accept it, to understand it, and to carry it with dignity without letting it break you. And there will be days where it feels heavy, where memories that never even fully formed will still somehow linger in your mind, where you will feel a strange sense of longing for something you never truly had. And that kind of longing is difficult to explain to anyone who has not felt it, because how do you describe missing someone who was never fully yours? How do you explain a connection that existed more in feeling than in reality, and yet it is real, and you know it, and they know it too, even if neither of you ever says it out loud, and somewhere in their life they are also learning how to carry this, how to balance what they feel with what they are responsible for, how to stay true to their commitments while still acknowledging that something inside them has changed. And that is not an easy thing to do, because it requires honesty with oneself, it requires emotional maturity, it requires the ability to accept that life is not always black and white, that sometimes two truths can exist at the same time. They can care for the life they have built and still feel something real for you, and you can respect their situation and still feel connected to them in a way that does not fade, and that does not make either of you wrong. It makes you human, it makes you aware, it makes you capable of understanding that love is not always simple, and as you continue to grow you will begin to see that this connection is not here to ruin your life, it is here to deepen it, it is here to show you that your heart has the capacity to feel beyond limits, to connect beyond circumstances, to understand beyond what is visible, and even though it may not turn into a traditional love story, it will still leave a permanent mark on who you are becoming. It will influence the way you treat others, the way you value honesty, the way you respect boundaries, because you have seen what happens when emotions exist without the ability to fully act on them. You have felt the weight of choosing integrity over desire, and that is something that shapes a person in a profound way. And maybe one day you will look back at this not with pain, but with a quiet sense of gratitude, because it taught you something rare, something most people never truly understand. It taught you that love is not always about being together, it is about connection. It is about respect, it is about knowing when to hold on internally and when to let go externally. It is about finding peace in the fact that not everything meaningful needs to become something permanent in your life, and even though there will always be a part of you that wonders what could have been, that curiosity will slowly transform into acceptance. Into a calm understanding that things happened the way they were meant to, not because it was easy, not because it was fair, but because it was necessary for your growth, for your journey, for the person you are becoming, and as you continue forward you will start to notice that this connection no longer feels like something that is pulling you apart. Instead it becomes something that quietly supports you from within, something that reminds you of your depth, your strength, your ability to feel and still stand strong, and somewhere out there they will also carry this in their own way, in their own silence, in their own life, and even if your paths never fully align, even if your stories continue separately, there will always be an invisible thread between you, not one that controls your life, but one that reminds you that at some point, in some moment, something real existed between two souls who were not meant to meet like this, and yet somehow they did, and that truth, no matter how quiet, no matter how hidden, will always remain a part of you, not as something that holds you back, but as something that made you deeper, wiser, and more aware of what it truly means to love with both heart and integrity. And eventually, there will come a time when the intensity of this feeling will no longer feel overwhelming but instead settle into something quieter, something more stable, something that no longer shakes you every day but still lives within you in a calm and steady way, because not all powerful emotions are meant to stay loud forever. Some are meant to soften with time, to transform into a kind of silent understanding that no longer demands answers, no longer asks why, no longer fights against reality, but simply accepts what is and what cannot be, and that is when you will truly begin to understand the purpose of this connection, not as something that was meant to complete you, but as something that was meant to awaken you, to show you parts of yourself that you had never explored before, to make you realize how deeply you are capable of feeling, how strongly you are capable of loving, even in situations where that love cannot be fully expressed, and that realization will stay with you as you continue living your life, meeting new people, creating new experiences, building your own path, and even though on the surface everything may look normal, there will always be a quiet layer inside you that carries this story, not as a wound, but as a memory that shaped you, and there will be moments, unexpected and random, when something will remind you of them, a song, a thought, a certain kind of silence, and for a brief second you will feel that same connection again, not in a painful way, but in a way that feels almost peaceful, like revisiting a part of yourself that you once struggled to understand but have now made peace with, and in those moments you will realize that this connection was never meant to trap you in the past, it was meant to become a part of your strength, something that you carry without it controlling you. Something that exists without interfering with your ability to move forward, and that is where true growth reveals itself, not in forgetting, not in erasing what you felt, but in learning how to live fully even while carrying something meaningful from your past, and somewhere out there they are also evolving in their own way, learning their own lessons, facing their own internal conflicts, and even if you are not a visible part of their everyday life, the impact of this connection will still exist within them just as it exists within you, quietly shaping their Perspective, quietly influencing the way they understand emotions, relationships, and choices, and maybe they will never say it out loud, maybe they will never fully express what they felt, but that does not mean it was not real, because some of the most real things in life are never spoken, they are simply felt and understood in silence, and as both of you continue your separate journeys, life will present new opportunities, new people, new moments that will require your attention and your presence, and slowly you will learn how to be fully present in those moments without feeling like you are betraying this connection. Because you will come to understand that honoring what you felt does not mean staying stuck in it. It means respecting it enough to let it exist in its own place while you continue to grow beyond it, and that is a kind of emotional maturity that very few people reach, the ability to love deeply without losing yourself, the ability to let go externally while still holding respect internally, and there will come a day when you no longer question why this happened, when you no longer feel the need to search for meaning in every detail, because the meaning will have already revealed itself through your growth, through your strength, through the way you now see life and relationships with a deeper sense of awareness, and maybe at that point you will even feel grateful, not because everything turned out the way you once wanted, but because it turned you into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understands that love is not always about outcomes, sometimes it is about experiences, about moments that change you in ways that nothing else could, and even if your paths never cross again in a significant way, even if your lives continue completely separately, there will always be a quiet respect between your souls, an unspoken acknowledgement that something meaningful existed, something rare, something that does not need validation or recognition to be real. And that kind of connection does not need a traditional ending to be complete, because it was never incomplete to begin with, it served its purpose the moment it awakened something inside both of you, the moment it made you feel something deeper than what you were used to, the moment it showed you that even in a complicated world, even in imperfect circumstances, something pure can still exist, even if only for a moment, even if only in silence, and as you move forward you will carry that understanding with you, not as a burden, but as a quiet source of strength, something that reminds you of who you are at your core, someone who can feel deeply, love honestly, and still choose what is right even when it is difficult, and that is not something everyone can do, that is something rare, something powerful, and maybe that was the true purpose of this connection all along, not to give you a person to hold on to, but to give you a version of yourself that you would have never discovered otherwise, and in the end, that is what will stay, not the unanswered questions. Not the what-ifs, not the imagined possibilities, but the growth, the strength, the quiet understanding that some connections are not meant to be lived out loudly, they are meant to be carried silently, with dignity, with respect, and with a deep sense of gratitude for having experienced something that touched your soul in a way that nothing else ever did, and that is where this story finds its peace, not in an ending, but in acceptance, not in possession, but in understanding, not in being together, but in knowing that even without that, what you felt was real, and that will always be enough, and in the end, what you will come to understand is something very few people ever truly reach in their lifetime, that not every love story is meant to be completed in the way the world defines completion. Not every connection is meant to turn into a relationship. Not every soulmate is meant to walk beside you in the physical sense, because some are meant to meet you only to change you, only to awaken something inside you that was waiting to be discovered. And as you sit with everything you have felt, everything you have gone through, all the confusion, all the questions, all the silent moments where your heart spoke louder than your mind, you will slowly begin to see that nothing about this was meaningless, nothing about this was a mistake. It was not something that happened to hurt you, it was something that happened to shape you, to bring you closer to a version of yourself that understands depth, that understands patience, that understands that love is not always about holding on. Sometimes it is about knowing when to let something exist without trying to control it, and that realization will bring you a kind of peace that does not come from answers but from acceptance, a peace that does not need closure in the traditional sense because it creates its own closure from within, and you will stop asking why it could not work. You will stop imagining what could have been, not because those thoughts disappear completely, but because they no longer control you, they no longer carry the same weight, they become softer, quieter, like echoes of something that once felt overwhelming, but now feels distant and understood, and in that space you will finally breathe differently, not with heaviness but with calm, not with longing but with quiet gratitude, because you will realize that you were able to feel something rare, something real, something that touched your soul in a way that most people spend their entire lives searching for, and you will know the difference between something finding, and even if it did not temporary in your life in the way you once hoped, and that awareness will guide you. It will something valuable. It showed you that your heart will help you build a life that is not just based on emotions but also are not shallow, that you can connect beyond surface somewhere along the way. And that is not people who are meant to stay. Regret. That is something who are able to walk beside you without because it means you are capable of without a kind the distance. Love that is not limited by circumstances. This connection had, a kind of love, and when that happens, even when it cannot be feel guilty, expressed you fully, will not feel and like as you move forward into your life. Felt, you will begin to create new. Understand that life is not about holding yourself back for something that was never meant, and this time you will carry a different fully unfold. It is about taking what you have learned. You will understand people more deeply. Living. You will value honesty to continue more. Loving, to continue growing, and even then, even as you move forward, there will always be a quiet part of you that remembers, not in a painful way, not in a way that holds you back, but in a way that feels almost sacred, like a chapter of your life that was never meant to be shared with the world but still remains one of the most meaningful parts of your journey, and somewhere out there they will also carry their own version of this memory, in their own silence, in their own life, and even if you never speak again, even if your paths never cross in any significant way, there will always be a quiet understanding between your souls, something that does not need words, something that does not need validation. Something that simply exists because it was real, and in the end that is what matters the most, not whether you ended up together, not whether the story turned into something visible, but the fact that for a moment, in a world full of noise and distraction, two souls recognized each other in silence, felt something genuine, and chose to honor it with integrity. instead of letting it turn into something that could have caused harm, and that choice, that quiet strength, that ability to feel deeply and still choose what is right, that is what defines this story, that is what gives it meaning, and as you finally let go of the need to hold on to it in a way that hurts, you will find that it never really leaves you, it simply changes form, it becomes a quiet strength inside you, a reminder of your depth, a reminder of your growth, a reminder that you are capable of something real, and that is enough, more than enough, and with that understanding you will finally reach a place where your heart feels light again, not because it forgot, but because it learned, not because it lost, but because it gained something far more valuable than what it once thought it needed, and that is where this story truly ends, not with sadness, not with regret, but with a quiet, steady peace that stays with you as you continue your journey, knowing that what was meant to touch your soul did exactly that, and nothing more was ever required.